So let's bring in Ramesh Srinivasan. He's a professor at the UCLA Department of Information Studies. He joins us live from Los Angeles. Ramesh, good to have you with us. So tell us briefly, what exactly is Project Nimbus and why is the project so controversial that even Google employees, as we just saw there, are now protesting about how it's being used with the Israelis as the war in Gaza continues?
Yeah, so Project Nimbus is a contract that Google and to a lesser extent Amazon Web Services signed with the Israeli government for $1.2 billion back in 2021. And as the person who was interviewed in your story indicated, there's actually a shocking lack of transparency around exactly what this project covers outside of providing interoperable, comprehensive cloud computing, which is essentially systems of data storage, data management, and sharing data for the Israeli government, which of course is likely to extend to the Israeli Defense Forces. So it's a project that it's a project that marks and sort of highlights the direct connections that big technology companies in the United States have, not only to the so-called military-industrial complex, but to directly aiding and abetting the Israeli government at a very difficult time.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you make, because the recent International Court of Justice ruling compelled Israel to prevent acts of genocide in Gaza. Could then big tech companies be held responsible if it's found that their AI software helped Israel to target Palestinian civilians in Gaza? I mean, could they be held as complicit to genocide?
Absolutely, because we know that these AI systems are actually have a number of false positives associated with them. There's reporting that came out just in the last couple of weeks on this. So the Israelis are actually using big tech, American big tech corporate AI software to predict targets and the probability that the target is where they think that they will engage in a sort of a violent act, right? So basically, the way this is working is corporate American big tech is actually aligned with many of the Israeli military's actions in these particular ways. And the fact that AI systems are being used indicates that there's a lack of regard by the Israeli state and the IDF, and obviously connected to this big tech companies in the false positives, meaning that they know, and everybody knows, these AI systems will make mistakes, right? So that there will be wrongful deaths and wrongful assassinations, as we've seen with so many civilian people in Gaza. They're basically complicit in the sense that they are signing contracts with this state.
Ramesh, so do we know then if Google and to a lesser extent Amazon are selling this kind of technology to other countries or militaries? And once they sell it, do they have any control over how it's used?
Right. I mean, that's very dependent on the specific agreements that any big tech company will have with another state. And mind you, this is not merely an issue involving Google and Amazon. The company Palantir, headed by Peter Thiel, who's a supporter of the former President Trump, is a company that's been using many of its military prediction. It's been using prediction software with other states. Project Nimbus is, at least, as I mentioned earlier, it's quite notable for its lack of transparency, right? So we don't really know if, sort of equivalents of this are happening with this particular set of partnerships for all data interoperability, for all cloud computing for other foreign states. Okay. But certainly one can imagine that that is something that could happen or is happening.
Ramesh, just a final thought to you. Are we now then in a world where big tech is selling this kind of controversial AI technology to the highest bidder in a very unregulated market space that even governments are powerless to police? And if so, what needs to be done?
Yeah, as you allude to, it's a much, much larger issue. Almost everything in our lives is turned into data. That data is being harvested by private corporations. It can be bought and sold. It was bought and sold in the case of examples like Cambridge Analytica. So we know that basically our data, these ways of quantifying different aspects of our lives, are being bought and sold and transacted, and largely are being transacted in relation to big tech platforms. We also know in the AI space, we're talking about a very limited set of actors, something of an oligopoly, both in the US and China, just a few actors that are using our data without compensating us potentially for all sorts of aims, whether they're advertising-oriented aims or, in this case, potential surveillance assassination types of aims. So what really needs to be done is every single corporate-driven technology must be regulated to ensure that it's audited, that there's disclosure, and that we are very clear about what data virus is being used, by whom, and for what purposes, and the rights are returned to people accordingly. And there's plenty of ways for big tech companies to continue to be the wealthiest companies in the whole world and in the history of the world, while still maintaining our rights over our own data, because they're expressive of our own lives as people.
Ramesh Srinivasan, really good to get your thoughts and your analysis there, Ramesh. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.